Let us look at what we call human anatomy and physiology. In this session, we basically want to understand the terms anatomy and physiology, and then we shall look at the approaches of study, especially anatomy, and then we shall look at what we call anatomical terms and descriptions. So let's basically start. So when we are looking at what we call human anatomy, we are looking at the study of the structure of the human body. Okay, so now we are basically looking at the different parts of the human body, what these different parts are made up of, and we also look at how different parts are related to one another. Okay, so that is what we term as human anatomy. So we're interested in looking at the structure of the human body. And then we have what we term as functional anatomy. In here, we are looking at the structure of the different parts of the human body in relation to how these parts actually work. Okay, why is it possible that certain parts can be able to play certain functions? So what do they have that actually enable them to play those different functions? So that is what you call functional anatomy. And then the last one that we are looking at here is the physiology. So with the physiology, it is about the study of how the human body works. Okay, so human physiology is about how the human body basically works or operates. And usually the emphasis is on how the human body works in the normal situations. This is basically to say that if the body is, let us say, if the body part is diseased, is having a disease or a disorder, that will not be physiology. That will be what we term as pathophysiology. Okay, what happens if an abnormality affects a particular part? What will happen? How will it be operating in such an abnormality or disorder? Okay, so physiology is only concerned with how the body works in normal circumstances. So here we are looking at the divisions of anatomy. This basically is about how we look at anatomy. When we are studying anatomy, we can decide to look at the physical features that we can see, okay, with our naked eyes. And that is what we term as macroscopic anatomy, or you can call that gross anatomy. Okay, and now when you are using a, an, a microscope, okay, when you're using a microscope to see the different cells that we find in different tissues or organs, then that is microscopic anatomy. Okay, so when we look at tissues, that is what we term as histology. When we are looking at cells, that is what we term as cytology. Okay, so when we talk about the approaches of studying anatomy, we are looking at if you want to look at the human body, how do you approach it? Are you looking at regions? Are you looking at systems? What are you looking at? What do you prefer? Okay, in looking at the human body. So here we are saying that you can decide to take what we call the regional approach, which is basically regional anatomy. You look at the head alone. So you look at what are the structures in the head, okay? And then you can come to the neck, thorax, abdomen, the pelvis, and then look at the limbs, the upper limbs, and the lower limbs. Okay, that is regional anatomy. You can also decide to look at it moving from one system to the other. Maybe you can say, let's start with the nervous system. Okay, so you look at the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Then you can also decide to look at, let us say, respiratory system, digestive system, and all the other systems. So you can decide which approach you can take. Okay, the last approach is when you decide to say, okay, let me look at these structures, but let me relate these structures to uh, clinical correlations. Okay, if we are looking at the head, we can decide to look at the head together with the clinical implications or diseases that can, or disorders that can actually affect the head. Okay, so you look at the structures and have clinical implications that are related to these structures. So that is what we term as clinical anatomy. Okay, so which approach do you prefer? Which approach is actually easier for you? So we are basically here again emphasizing that you can use gross anatomy as an approach, looking at the structures using your eyes without the aid of any instrument that allows you to see very small structures. Okay, that is gross anatomy. Okay, so look at large structures, muscles, nerves. These are things that you can see with your naked eye. Oh, or you can use a microscope, like we said earlier on, and with a microscope you can be able to see tiny structures that you could not have, that you cannot be able to see using your naked eyes. The last approach that we are talking about is what we call embryology. Okay, so if, for example, you are going to look at the heart, um, you don't want to start with looking at the structure of the heart in in an adult human being. Okay, you want to start understanding how is the heart formed. How is the heart formed? What could happen if the heart is not formed well? That is what we call embryology. You look at the development of these different structures.